Welcome to Casual Sundays on Foxtrot Whiskey Bravo. I'm your host, Beth. Today's topic is continuation from episode number 8, all about preparing for your check ride in order to reduce your stress levels before you go to your check ride. On episode 9 today, I'll be talking about some common questions you might get or some scenarios you might get during the oral portion of your check ride. So I hope you like the topic that we're going to talk about today. Some basic stuff I have to cover. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to email me at nerdybathtext@gmail.com. If you'd like to know about when I put a new episode out, please follow me on social media, on Twitter or on Instagram under nerdybathtext. My website is nerdybathtext.com. So now let's get started with episode number 9. Common questions that you might get during your private pilot check ride. Sit back and enjoy the flight on Foxtrot Whiskey Bravo. Now, how this podcast episode is going to work, I'm going to give you some scenarios, or I'm going to give you some questions, and it's your job to go seek the answers. If you need help finding the answers, please feel free to email me. Again, my email is nerdybathtext@gmail.com, or inbox me on Instagram or Twitter. I'm on Instagram or I'm on Twitter. The first scenario: you're about to take a cross-country flight trip with you and your best friend. This is your first trip after you received your pilot license. Your arrival time to your destination is going to be 8 p.m. And the thing is, what must you might do or have or be prepared for this trip? Some things you might want to talk about is some documents that you, the pilot, must have. You want to talk about documents and the maintenance for the airplane. You want to talk about, it's at nighttime, right? So you want to talk about currency and proficiency. Remember, those are two different things. If you don't know what they are, they're going to cover them. So make sure you know what currency and proficiency is. Know the difference. Make sure you know your fuel requirements at nighttime, because remember, you're planning to arrive at your destination at 8 p.m. What are some of your personal minimums? If you do not have a personal minimum checklist, I will put in the description a link to a FAA document that helps you make your own personal minimums. What are some aeromedical factors that you might have at nighttime? When can you log time at night in order to be current, right? So when you take your trip, are you current or not? What are some of the airport beacons you might be looking for at night, especially if you go to a high populated area, a lot of airports? So what color are the airport beacons for like land, sea, and military? Since it's your first flight and most likely you're pretty poor after receiving your private pilot license like most of us are, what about cost sharing? Can you and your friends share costs? And if you can, how can you? If you can't, why can't you? Now, continue with the exact same scenario. You and your friend, you did all your stuff. You and your friend got in the airplane. You did your cross country, and you know that you have to make a landing, right? You cannot land at your destination. You have to make a fuel stop. So, you and your friend, y'all make this fuel stop. And during the fuel stop, y'all get some fuel. You use the restroom, and you get a snack. And it's already going to be nighttime. It's already going to be, say, it's going to be 7 o'clock at night. When you get back to the airplane, you know you're going to land at night, you perform your walk around. You turn all the lights on to make sure all your lights are working, but you notice your position lights are not working. What can you do if your position lights aren't working? Can you fix them yourself? Can you still fly? Do you have to get a maintenance person? What are the requirements for position lights at night, and what can you do as a pilot in command? Your PIC right now. So now you're thinking about these position lights. You're like, You decided that there was a maintenance person there, And the maintenance person went and he fixed your position light. It was a fuse or something. He fixed it for you, and now you're still thinking. This is a follow-up question. When do you need to turn on your positioning lights for a night flight? Is it airworthy to have your position lights not working either at night or in the daytime? So that first one that I just talked about was a scenario. In your scenario, you had two parts that you have to discuss. The next one is my question number 2. When do you need to complete your flight review? If you know what a flight review is, go back and check what a flight review is. Sometimes they might call it a biannual flight review, but now it's called a flight review. When are you required to log your flights? Are you required to log your flights all the time? Are you required to log your flights a certain time? The question is, when are you required to log your flights? Another thing is not really a question. I was talking to a DP, and this DP was talking about how this person did not know how to put oil inside the airplane. They're going to go she would do her check ride, so she was about to do her check ride, and the oil was low, so she needed to add some oil, and she had no clue how to add it. So she was waiting for the maintenance person to get there to add the oil inside the airplane. He kind of frowned down on that a little bit. So just make sure you know how to put the oil inside the airplane. At least do it one time. The next question I have is, when do you need to use carb heat? I would suggest you use your checklist whenever your checklist requires it. And if you experience any kind of engine roughness, another thing you have to know for your Checkride is know your pedostatic system. Know any errors that you might get from your pedostatic system and how to fix them. So like if you get any error from your pedal tube, what are you supposed to do? If you think your static port is clogged, what can you do to fix it? What if you're flying along and your engine quits? If your engine quit, what will happen to the airplane, right? Or if you're flying along, what if you lose your electrical power? If you lose your electrical power, would your engine quit on you? Yes or no? What does it mean? When you're looking at your amps, what does it mean if you have a discharge or overcharge, right? So what if your amp goes to the left-hand side of the little needle? Or what if the little needle goes all the way to the right-hand side? What can you do if that happens? And is it an emergency? And what's going to happen if it goes all the way to the left or all the way to the right? That was actually one of my Checkride questions. What is your best gliding airplane? Which is your VA. So what is your VA in your airplane that you fly? Does VA change with weight? Does VA change with altitude? Those are things that your DP, your designated pilot examiner, might ask you. Another question. You're doing your walk around flight and you go on top, you do a walk around flight, you turn on electrical like you're supposed to in the beginning, and you notice your fuel gauge are marked empty. So you're like, okay, my fuel gauges are marked empty, and most likely I need fuel. You climb on top, or you look at the wings and you open it up and you notice that the airplane is full. But your gauge is marked empty, but you know your tanks are full all the way to the top. The question is, can you still fly or depart knowing that your fuel gauge is marked empty? Know the difference between basic and empty weight. Another thing you do have to know, this is with maintenance. How do you know which ADs are required for your specific airplane? And after you know which ones are required, how do you know they have been complied with or not? Always check your ADs in your airplane and know if they're done or not. The next question is about make sure you know your airspace stuff. So this is specific, this is in general. I wrote down, know everything on the sectional about your airspace requirements, right? So make sure you know your cloud requirements, your visibility, your airspeed, your equipment, etc. for the airspaces around you and any random ones that your DP might pick. Know your special use airspaces. Know your restricted. Know your MOAs, MOA. Know your prohibited. Know your TFRs. On your section, also know the VORs, how that work. Know if your sectional chart is in true north or magnetic north, or know what isogonic lines are. Know when you have, let me think about this. Know the requirements if I think it's a wildlife refugee or animal life. Let me go look it up real quick. Okay, sorry about that. It is called the wildlife refuge. Make sure you know what altitude, the minimum altitude you can fly over that area. Let's see, what else do I have? I don't know if I say TFRs. Make sure you know your TFRs. So make sure anything on your VFR sectional chart, you know it. So know your airspace from the ground level all the way up to 18,000. And know what little symbols mean, like the L. Know how to read the VOR box. Know how to read, it was going to be HIWAS. Just make sure you know your sectional very clearly. And I'll put a link to a video that goes over the VFR sectional. Now the next one is the cross country. So I put down, you are going on another cross country flight. The outside temperature is 105 and the airport elevation is 230 feet. Your density altitude is 2,400. Your runway length is 3,000. You are at max weight and full of fuel. You have your passengers and you have your bags, so you're completely maxed out. You want to discuss your planning. When you're discussing your planning for stuff like this, you want to discuss your weight of balance. You want to discuss your center of gravity and your stability versus controllability, and what's going to happen with stall speeds and your airspeed and your cruise. You want to talk about the effects of density altitude on performance, and that's the main one. You want to talk about your effects of density altitude on performance. How is it being hot, heavy, and high density altitude going to affect your performance of your aircraft? What can you expect to happen on takeoff? And that's really important. That's one scenario. Another scenario I have. You decided to go on a weekend trip this time. You and your friend are going on a weekend trip. You're departing from an uncontrolled field and you're planning to land in Class Delta airspace. And on this trip, you're landing in Class Delta airspace because you're planning to go skydiving. Not skydiving. You plan to go diving with your friend. The weather looks good at your departure, and the weather looks great at your arrival. Now the question is, since you're leaving an uncontrolled field, how do you pick up flight following in the air? When do you have to announce yourself before entering Class Delta airspace? And after you announce your Class Delta airspace, after you announce yourself in Class Delta airspace, you notice your radios went out right afterwards. And my question is, are you cleared to land? What do you do if you lose your radios in Class Delta airspace and you're being cleared to land? Now, another follow-up question I could do is, what do you do if you lose your radios and you're trying to land in Class Charlie airspace? Is that even possible? Can you do that? What can you do? Now, you got in your Class Delta airspace and you finally land. You land, you went to the FBO and they have a mechanic there and the mechanic fixed your radios for you. So while the mechanics fix your radios, you're at this trip plan, you and your friend go out and y'all go diving. The question is, as PIC, as a pilot in command, what are your responsibilities after going diving? Can you go diving right away? Do you have to wait a certain time? Do you have to do a certain altitude? What is that call after you go diving? And what can happen if you go flying right after your dive? Another thing that your DP, designated pilot examiner, might talk about is your signage. some land and hold short operations. Make sure you know your airport signages. I didn't get asked that many questions, but I will add a link to descriptions that gives you like a little quiz that you can do to practice your airport signages. Know your aeromedical factors, which is like spatial disorientation, anemia, hyperventilation, carbon dioxide poisoning, stress, fatigue. Those are the big ones. Carbon dioxide. Know about ADM, which is aeromedical decision-making skills. And you can find it under your risk management and your FAA risk management book. Those are some of the things I think you should know for your to prepare for your private pilot oral portion of your check ride. I didn't want to make it long, so I want to cut off around 20 minutes. We're almost around 20 minutes. If you made it to the end, I would like to say thank you for listening all the way to the end. I hope this podcast, this topic actually helped. If you want me to cover more topics, please feel free to email me. My email is nerdybeftx@gmail.com. If you have any questions, please email me or just get me on Instagram in the inbox. I'm always on Instagram. I'm always looking at my inbox. So just ask me on Instagram in the inbox. If you like what you heard, please leave a review. Most likely, if you like it, leave a 5-star review, because the more reviews I get, the higher up the podcast comes up when people look for aviation-related podcasts. And I'd like to say thank you for listening in. Please come back next time on a Sunday. I'll post more stuff. Peace. Bye-bye.